For those in the audience, we're just waiting a few minutes for some technical difficulties, and as soon as they're resolved, we can start our meeting. Thanks for your patience. I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting of June 12th, 2019 to order at this point. Can I have both my fellow commissioners and those in the audience silence your cell phones just so they don't ring during the process? Thank you much. Can we have the roll call, please?
Present.
Commissioner Donenfeld?
Present.
I don't like this, sorry. Okay, here we go, I'm sorry. Commissioner Gardner? Commissioner Hirschbein?
Present.
Commissioner Hudson?
Present.
Commissioner Song?
Present.
Vice Chair Maruzzi? Here. And Chair Woods?
Here, present.
We're
Thank you.
good. Thank you.
Can we have a staff report on the posting of the agenda, please?
Mr. Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday, June the 6th. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
All right, number 4 is we're going to talk about the agenda, and we've had a request on item 2D, which is the Riviera Hotel, to table that item to a future undate known. So I'd like to see if there's a motion to approve the agenda with item 2D being tabled
By who?
by the applicant and staff both.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The motion is, the agenda has been approved. Thank you. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on the consent calendar, non-public hearing items, and items of general interest within the subject matter of the commission. Comments on the public hearing may be made at this time, and however, the commission cannot take any action on items not listed on the agenda. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak to the commission on any items of our jurisdiction. If you're here to speak about the Riviera Hotel, this would be your time to come forward and speak because we're tabling that item. Is there anyone here to speak on the Riviera Hotel? Is there anyone here to speak on any non-public hearing item or wants to address the commission in general? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you. Next, we move to the consent calendar. And can we have a motion on the consent calendar? Commissioner Donenfeld, did you have a question?
I just have a point of order. I will be abstaining from the minutes of May 22nd since I was not present.
And Mr. Chair, I will be abstaining from voting on the meeting minutes for April 24th, as I was not present.
And I will be abstaining on the meetings from May 8th as I was not present.
And I will not be abstaining on anything, because I was present.
Did we get all that in a motion? Can someone put that into a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved. The second?
I'll second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. The minutes are approved. The consent calendar is approved. Thank you. We're now going to move on to public hearings. Public hearing item 2A is a request by Rick Mitchell of Elevation Property Management on behalf of, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Zalika Via Lola LP and Larinex Via Lola LP for a conditional use permit to convert the existing 17 short-term rental units to hotel units at the Twist, which is located within a mixed-use building at 140 West Via Lola. Can we have a staff report, please?
Thank you. Good afternoon. As introduced, this is a conditional use permit application submitted by the applicant to convert the existing 17 short-term rental units to hotel units at the Twist. The project site is located at the northwest corner of West Villalona and North Palm Canyon Drive. The property has a main building on the parcel that's located on the Villalona, and there's a parking lot in the rear. The zone designation of this particular property is split right in the middle. West half of the property is zoned R2, and the east half of the property is zoned C1. The Twist is a 35-unit rental unit building, and 17 of which are currently short-term rental and 18 are long-term rentals. And this application proposes the 17 short-term rental units to be converted to hotel units in response to an amendment to the vacation rental ordinance in 2017, which no longer permits vacation rental activity on non-single-family dwelling properties. This building is a two-story mixed-use building, which has a total floor area of 34,128 square feet. It accommodates 5 commercial tenants and the Twist. This image to show the spatial distribution of the long-term and the short-term rental units within the building, and this is the first floor. And this is the second floor. The area that's highlighted in the orange is the short-term rental units, which are being proposed to be converted to hotels. And the blue portion is the long-term rental units. The site provides 37 off-street parking spaces in the rear parking lot, and then also 8 parking spaces on the West Villalona frontage. This is a total of 45 parking spaces. Based on the parking calculations, the property provides 45 parking spaces for this project, whereas 58 parking spaces are provided, 58 parking spaces are required. The current parking is actually legal non-conforming, and the project is not proposing expansion to the building, therefore it does not require additional parking spaces. This image is a historic photo of the property. As it's indicated on the pole sign, this sign indicates that the property was utilized as a hotel/apartment building in the past, and it has been this way. According to the city records, the property has been conducting a short-term rental activities since December 17th of 2012. In reviewing the proposed application, staff finds that the proposed project is consistent with the intent of the general plan and meets the applicable zoning regulations, considering the fact that the property has been utilized as a mixed-use building, and the proposed functional aspects of a short-term rental and a hotel are essentially identical. And the project also does not propose any exterior changes to the building, and no expansion to the building itself is proposed. Therefore, the staff finds that the project will not create a detrimental impact on the site's existing uses as well as the future land uses. And staff is recommending the Planning Commission to approve the project subject to the conditions of approval included in the staff report resolution section. Staff and applicants are both available to answer any questions you may have, and this concludes the staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for staff? Commissioner Donenfeld.
Regarding parking, the fact that it's legally non-conforming significantly, that doesn't control our decision here with respect to a new use to the property from a gallery to a bar, does it? I mean, if we deemed this property to be significantly underparked, the fact that you're calling it legally non-conforming does not control our decision-making with respect to the adequacy of the parking on this project. Is that correct?
You had mentioned the use of a bar. We're not considering that item yet, but we are looking at this entire property as a whole. Relative to the findings that the Planning Commission must make relative to a conditional use permit, you have to assess that there are no impacts to adjacent properties. Under this situation, you may find that parking impacts do pose an impact to adjacent properties, and so you would be able to condition accordingly. I will point out that on the next item on the agenda, relative to
Right.
the lounge use, there is a requirement for a specific parking plan.
In the conditions, I saw that.
Yes, and so in that one, because there is an intensification of use, we have included that as a condition of approval.
Is there any thought that the converting the use of these units would cause a difference in the traffic pattern or traffic usage of the property?
One of the things that Ms. Kikuchi has pointed out, that in terms of the conversion from a vacation rental use to a hotel use, the uses are essentially the same, and so we don't anticipate to be any differences in traffic.
And I'm curious, historically, how did it come to be a legal non-conforming use with respect to the parking?
It is assumed that when the building was constructed, I believe 1961, Noriko? 1952, that we had less stringent parking requirements in place at that point in time. I think generally our parking requirements became more stringent in the early 1970s, and so that's probably when it became legally non-conforming, is my assessment.
And when it was rehabbed very recently, successfully so, and uses were changed within the complex, there was no consideration given to relooking at the parking numbers?
Because there wasn't an intensification or any addition of square footage to the building, no, we didn't assess that then. What we're seeing here with the next item on the agenda, where we are converting a gallery space, which has a less intensive parking requirement, to a cocktail lounge,
Right.
which requires more parking. It's when you have that intensification or change in use where additional parking spaces would be required.
Okay, thank you. My other question is with respect to music, and there's going to be some outdoor seating, is the music going to be outdoors as well as indoors? And if so, is it going to be amplified? How is it going to be treated?
Staff included the conditions of approval, and that's actually PLN 1.
What plan number? Oh,
Outdoor live entertainment is not permitted. However, outdoor amplified music shall fully conform to the applicable noise regulations. Business owner will be responsible for monitoring the noise level to make sure that the noise level does not exceed the maximum decibel level that's stipulated in the city's noise ordinance.
I would assume that since it's going to be a hotel, which is similar to its previous use, that the music that's already in place will continue to be the music that will be used once we change the designation of these units? And I don't think there's been any complaints about that level, from my perspective.
No,
I can ask the applicant when, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Hirschman.
Could you put the site plan up again that shows the different zoning and the lots? So the area to the north that's dotted with the large parking area, is that a separate lot? Is it tied to this project? Could it be developed independent of this project in the future?
yes, the parcel is actually a separate parcel, and the Department of Engineering Services is recommending a condition of approval which requires the merger of these lots or lot line adjustment. And that's included in the resolution. Page 6 of the resolution, engineering condition of approval number 12.
So that would, once that's place, that whole area is one lot? Is that the And the intent was to make it so it had to stay tied, the parking had to stay tied to the
That
project?
is correct.
Okay. In terms of code issues that are triggered when you convert from an R2 use, is it currently R2, the building? The residential is currently R2?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay,
It's a
so when you
limited-
convert from an R2 use to a hotel use, there's certain code issues that get triggered. I noticed that one of the, I believe, engineering requirements was that it be sprinklered. Were there other code issues that are triggered by hotel use that are not covered in the conditions?
The conditions of approval includes the requirements from multiple city departments, which include the building, safety, engineering, and the planning as well. With regards to the bringing the building up into conformance to the current standards, building safety is requiring a set of conditions, but that is for the interior changes that are required for the building.
Right, and
Let me just jump in there and point to building condition number 7.
can you tell me what page, please?
It's on page 4 of 10 of the conditions of approval,
That's number 7, okay.
BLD 7.
Oh, okay, so
So
that's
that-
in the future.
Yeah, that covers
okay.
the building permit side of the conversion.
So why would they call out the sprinkler part of it then?
It's what the Building and Safety Department has chosen to do. They know that that is at least one of the requirements that will be
Okay.
in place, and then
Okay.
they have number 7, which covers anything
Okay.
else.
In terms of any operational requirements that the city imposes on a hotel, is a city is a hotel required to staff the property certain hours, around the clock, number of staff? Is there anything that regulates that in the city code?
Not in the zoning code, but I'm pretty sure that hotel operation is subject to the tax, TOT tax requirements. So there might be requirements that are included in that TOT section.
Yeah, no, I was more going to the operations side of it. If it's a hotel, are any laws or codes triggered that requires any kind of staff on site?
No, there isn't. You may recall a couple of years ago, we approved the Black House Hotel, which was 16 units on Calle and Celia, which is entirely unstaffed other than maid service, which comes in daily. That the whole operation is based on an online check-in, et cetera. So no, in the zoning code, there aren't any requirements in terms of staffing.
Or any place else in the city?
No, not in the municipal
All right,
code.
thank you.
Commissioner Song. And I'll come back to you, Commissioner Hudson.
So, going back to the fire sprinkler requirement by the building department and also the fire department, there's a letter at the very end of, as part of attachment 3, in which Mr. Mitchell mentions that they're drawing up the plans and they're complying with R1, and that they're going to add fire sprinklers to 8 of the long-term, and then 10 of the vacation rentals. Is that exhibit to show us that their response and that has been negotiated, or is the overall sort of blanket requirement from fire and building what the applicant should meet the requirements for?
This is a justification letter which was submitted by the applicant at the time of conditional use permit application submission. And the conditions of approval are actually created after the actual application was reviewed by multiple city departments. In terms of where the Mr. Mitchell got the information, I do not know exactly what kind of conversation or communication took place. However, the project is subject to these conditions of approval if the Planning Commission approves as stated.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That gives me a sequence of events.
Anything else, Commissioner? Commissioner Hudson?
Thank you. I have a question, I would like a verification regarding the 5 parking spaces on Camino del Corte that you stated were not part of the parking count because they are in fact in the public right-of-way. Is that correct? Do you have any photographs of that frontage of the project? I guess, 2 questions really. I live in the neighborhood and I drive by the site pretty often. Maybe I'm remembering the condition pre-renovation of the project, but at one time, they're showing now 5 parallel parking spaces parallel to the street. As I recall, it used to be that they were actually 90-degree parking spaces there. Maybe that went away because of the garden walls that they created. But I guess my other question is, as a verification, I always assumed as I drove by that those spaces were somehow part of the project and not public parking per se. So there's no signage that you know of along that frontage that says, that these 5 parking spaces are just for the project? Or is it just sort of unsigned and anybody can park there if they're brave enough to?
The applicant can clarify the information. However, based on the information that's submitted or provided by the applicant and the property owner, it is the staff's understanding that these parkings are not really designated, although a lot of the patrons and the guests utilize it.
Right.
But however, the applicant is here today, so
Okay.
can confirm the
Great.
information.
Great, thank you.
Are there any more questions of staff? Seeing no more questions, is the applicant present? Okay. If you'd like to come to the mic, you'll have 5 minutes to make a presentation on your project. 10 minutes, excuse me. You'll actually have 10 minutes.
Well, I won't need that much time,
All right.
but I'm available for questions, and then also people that worked on the project and the conversion are here too. So to start, my name's Tim Brinkman, and I also have a house in the neighborhood of Monte Vista, and would drive by the building regularly.
Excuse me, just 1 minute. We need to turn that microphone on.
There we go.
There it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Tim.
Sorry about that. Start over or continue from where? Okay. So I would drive by the property back in, since I had my house on Monte Vista from 2007. And the subject property, 140 West Violola, was not only an eyesore, but also crime-ridden. And in 2012, I met with Howard Hawks and Kevin Kemper, who are here from H3K, seeing if there was something that we could do with the property to improve it. The building had been for sale for 2 years with no takers. And so I actually got a business partner of mine. He and I decided, let's take a investment on this and try to improve it. And from speaking with Howard and Kevin, we all agreed that we weren't able to make improvements at the margin, that this was something that we would need to make a major renovation to try to improve it. At the time of the purchase, none of the commercial units were occupied. And of the 35 residential units, it's either 11 or 13 that were occupied, only 4 of which were paying rent. So it was a condition of the property at the time. We started doing some research. We found that photo that you saw on the screen that showed that the original use of the property was a hotel and apartments. And it seemed reasonable to try to move it back to that to create the vibrancy that looks like was there in the photo. And so that was our goal, was to use the West End as vacation rentals. And so we met with the city to comply with the vacation rental rules at the time, and designated those 10 units. And really from that point on, it wasn't really a matter, we never calculated the regulatory risk. We really were looking at the business risk because a lot of people thought we were crazy, that who wants to stay in that building on a vacation? So, but we forged ahead, and making the conversion, the property proved to be very popular, both the long-term rentals and the short-term rentals. And so the building was really flourishing. And then there were new laws coming in terms of regulating the vacation rentals, which basically outlawed vacation rentals in multi-unit buildings. And so for the last few years, we've been trying to navigate in terms of complying with several of the laws that are really geared more towards single-family homes, and then trying to get exceptions, to other laws. And it's not really a viable long-term solution to keep trying to get exceptions to keep the property operating. It's also stressful for the employees. So with that, we are seeking to convert the 17 units that are currently operating as vacation rentals into a hotel. There's been a lot of thought process in terms of the units that are being converted. But again, nothing operationally will change. It's the way the property has been operating for the last several years very successfully. And it really returns it back to the original use of the purpose of the property. So we're excited to proceed with the conversion. There are some upgrades in terms of the structure that we're making with the sprinklers and adding ADA and doing other things that I think will only further enhance the property. So that's it, and I'm open for questions too.
Thank you. We may call you back up for questions.
Certainly.
And you'll come back. You have a 2-minute rebuttal after we hear from the public.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anyone here from the public that wants to speak on this project? Could you come forward to the mic and state your name for the record? And you'll have 2 minutes.
Hello, I'm Gordon McGregor. So about 24 years ago, I came to or actually 1990s when I first came to Palm Springs. And for 24 years, I've just been visiting it. And it was in December of 2014 when I walked onto the property of the Twist to look for a rental. And I fell in love. And I immediately filled out the application. And 2 weeks later, I moved from Solana Beach to Palm Springs. I've been there 4.5 years. And I just want to champion their application because it's an amazing place to be. And what I love is people often ask me, what's my favorite part about living in Palm Springs? And I always say living at the Twist. Because it's vibrant, it has a great vibe, it has a great feeling, and it just makes everyone who walks on the property joyful. And the team is really cool, and I just love what it's all about. I work in the cruise ship industry, so I often call it a cruise ship ported on Villalobos, because there's a cruise director in Paul and Daryl. There's the captains, which are Mike and Rick. And then we have an amazing maintenance staff of Emilio and Lorenzo, great housekeeping staff. So really, I feel like I'm on a cruise ship 24/7. And I love the way that this photo reminds us of how joyful and how vibrant it really is. And one of the other things I love is the fact that in addition to all of the residents that make us joyful and all the guests that come, we obviously have all the commercial opportunities with coffee shops, art galleries, vintage clothing stores, a tiki bar, and possibly a new lounge, plus a restaurant. So, from an experience as a resident here in Palm Springs, it doesn't get any better than the Twist. And from a parking point of view, I also want to share, I have been there 4.5 years. I've never had to park on the street. So in terms of with the flow of what we've had, we've always been able to park somewhere in that back lot or on the side lot. So from a living point of view, it's always really served us as residents in addition to hosting the short-term rentals. And I just want to say, the things that make me love it are the charm, the staff so welcoming, and just the experience of what people, it's really fun because the people on the street are always looking in. We're sort of this jewel box of that corner of Palm Springs because everyone's curious about us. And when they walk in, there's just this vibrancy and celebration. And I always love showing it off. So I just came to really support the application. Tim and his team who make just living there a joy. And I wouldn't imagine living anywhere else. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being part of the process. It's very reassuring to see that. Tim, you can come up. Does someone else want to speak? Is there someone else in the audience that would like to speak on the project? And you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I'm Howard Hawks, and this is
Kevin Kemper,
and
we're a
we're
team.
with H3K Design, and we were fortunate enough to be part of the early design process of the building. And I don't know how many of you were here in its former incarnation when it had not one but 2 layers of seafoam green wrought iron bars surrounding it. And I think part of that was because the rules may have changed on the width for children's heads. So instead of removing the old ones, people just kept putting more and more bad things on it. So it really is a jewel now, and we're proud to have been part of it. And we were even more excited to hear when we were brought on that it was a mixed-use building. And I think its designation as that has really exceeded everyone's expectations as far as vibrancy and what it's done to that part of town. It was the first building up there that wasn't sort of a detox center or a dialysis center or some just plain old office space that really, really brought vibrancy and life and color and people to that part of town. And when we were hired to do the renovations, we, as Tim had mentioned, the applicant, we knew that we really had to hit it out of the park as far as finishes and making the building attractive. If, we just painted it and took the bars off and did a few things, it wouldn't have really made much of a difference. So we kind of went all out, and I think it really paid off.
All I just wanted to say is kind of reconfirm what Howard's saying in terms of the mixed use, where this truly is a mixed use building where you have long-term, short-term, and commercial tenants, and that's kind of unusual in most spaces. Usually it's just residential and commercial. So it is a very vibrant building, and I love the analogy of the cruise ship because it does have that vibe. So it'd be the USS twist.
Yeah, and I know people who have rented commercially, they've lived there full-time, and they've also stayed there on holiday, and they actually really, really love that unique mix. I think it almost could be a model for other parts of Palm Springs to have the vibrancy instead of, daytime, the commercial is alive, and at nighttime, the residents are home, and this is sort of a nice mix. It's a really, really good balance, and I live near there too in the neighborhood and drive by frequently, and I sometimes actually just take that route just to try to drive by the building and smile. So we definitely support the applicant in having these vacation rental units convert to hotel. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak? Can you just state your name for the record? Thank you.
Mark Hodgen. I'm the booking and leasing manager at the Twist. I'm part of the public too, but I thought I'd share just a few things. After listening to Gordon talk, I work at the Twist, but now I would like to live there. I share his enthusiasm. We enjoy working there and making it a great place. I was here 3 years ago talking about vacation rental ordinances and all of the problems that were going over then. And now really what we're doing here is we just want to become a hotel for regulatory purposes. We just want to be in business and be able to move forward in a clean way. We think that this would work best for us since we're multi-unit and not single-family dwelling. So that's really all the changes. We don't have any plans to change the property in its current configuration. We love as everybody's saying, the mixed-use aspect, having long-term residents along with vacationers from around the world. So one of the favorite things, expanding on what was said, is I love the social aspect of the property. So you'll see it repeatedly. You'll have a vacationer from somewhere else. That's their first time in Palm Springs, and then they'll meet a long-term resident at the pool or outside, and they chit-chat for a minute or having a swim together, and it's just kind of a cool thing. It also works great for businesses when you have people from out of town. The businesses benefit from that. The city benefits from tax revenue. And having long-term residents gives us year-round stability. They're there. They love being there. It's just a great thing. About the parking, I just wanted to mention that this is kind of moving into the next segment, but a lot of people who will be frequenting that business will be using Uber and Lyft, and so they will not need parking. So be sure and consider that portion of the argument. And we just look forward to a continued success. We love the Twist. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience that wants to speak on the project? Seeing no one that wants to speak, Tim, the applicant can come back up and you'll have 2 minutes if you want to address us on anything else.
Or I think they said it probably better than I could, but I'm open to answering questions if there's anything, issues that came up.
Great, there may just be, so if you just
Okay.
hold on right there, that'd be great. Are there questions of applicant? Commissioner Donenfeld?
Mr. Brinkman, first of all, congratulations on an incredibly successful project. I live in the neighborhood, and you actually transformed that corner beautifully. The units that are being converted, do they all have kitchens in them?
They do.
And as a result of that, are you going to find that the kind of person or families that you rent to for these units, since they have kitchens, will be sort of different in nature than most hotel occupants?
No, and I think Mark and the staff who's on site can answer this better, but most people do not touch the kitchens, but they want the kitchens. So they eat out.
Even though it was a short-term rental too, they just weren't using the kitchens.
They don't. I mean, there's the rare exception that will use it, but for the most part, they may throw some drinks in the refrigerator, something like that, but it's rare that someone would cook, and they really, given the location where it is and that you have, 10 very good restaurants within about a 5-minute walk, most people are eager to go out and explore the neighborhood, and that's what we find.
I assume since you have kitchens, you've always been subject to the fire code and always complied with the provisions of the fire code.
I believe so. I don't know specifically, but we try to comply with all the rules. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there more questions of the applicant? I have, Commissioner Song.
So Tim, it's almost like you're doing the same business, but we're now, calling it into a hotel. So just walk us a little bit through it. Everything is the booking, the registration. If I were to stay in your place and I come, where would I know where to park? Or is the parking widely open and it says, guests welcome to park here? Where would the staff, can the staff have assigned parking spaces in your parking lot? Can you tell me a little bit of how the organization?
Yeah,
set
so up until about a year ago, the parking was wide open. We decided to actually use parking permits for residents and for the vacation renters, where they can throw something on their dashboard. And really, it's not a matter because parking hasn't been an issue, but it was really a matter of, hey, there's a car parked here for 3 days and we don't know whose it is, or someone left a car, something, more along those lines. Also, we did restripe the parking lot to increase the number of spaces. And when we did the ADA spaces on Villola, we lost some spaces with that, and we added to the back of the property. So
if I'm coming in and I'm picking, I got the third floor unit, I'm just freely able to walk in and then go directly to my unit and then be able to open the door because I already paid for the room online and so on.
right, yeah, there's no third floor, but
I mean, second floor.
yeah. And there is an elevator, a working elevator. So there's instructions that are sent. Most the bookings, and again, Mark could probably answer this better than I could, but I would say probably 95% of the bookings are online, probably even higher. The people that book there tend to be very internet savvy. And just as a comparison, I have a hotel in Idlewild, and it's probably 95% are over the phone. They're not internet savvy, so the people there, need a lot more hand-holding. But the people that stay at the Twist are the type that they come in, they do their own passcode, they understand how the internet, everything works, and then they head to the Tiki Bar or one of the restaurants, and that's the type of customer that's there. So.
Okay, and I noticed after the gate you have an office and sort of an office use restroom and so on. And so your staff, that's the area where they gather or?
That's correct. There's an
Okay.
on-site office.
Okay. Okay, and could you explain about the letter about improving on 7 of the units for fire sprinkler? Was that something that you were saying to the fire department, that you're in progress of?
Yes. Yeah, so
Okay.
that starts July 8th.
Okay, so
So
you,
it's going to be, I believe, and they can confirm the numbers, but I think it's 7 of the vacation rentals and 10 of the long-term rentals are receiving fire sprinklers. The others have them.
and you have discussed that with the fire department? and
Oh,
the
no, we
building
already
department?
have the plans in place, and
Okay.
they've been out and speccing the project and paid the permit fee and all of that. So that's in motion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it should be done before the end of July.
Yeah, I also want to just congratulate you on vitalizing that corner. I love the fact that you maintained the torches on the outside of the building. I think that's very nice, and it's a nod to our history. So I want to thank you very much for that. And I agree with you. It's got the H3K colors all over it, and it's very bright, and it definitely pops in a good way.
Yeah,
in an absolutely
no.
good way.
Well, I appreciate the accolades, but it's really it's a phenomenal team from early on with H3K, because I wouldn't have the confidence in terms of stepping forward without knowing their work and the work that they did, and then the staff that we have is phenomenal. That makes it fun. So I think the whole project works, and it's a great thing.
And your
appreciate
rooms
that.
pop online as well. They definitely pop. I do have a question for you. When you convert from a vacation rental to a hotel, there's a package of benefits that kind of come with that conversion. One of them is special events. Do you anticipate that you'll be hosting any special events in the pool area or elsewhere on the property?
There's probably not going to be any change from what we're doing at this point. I mean, we've had, there's been 1 or 2 weddings, I believe, that have been there. There's several bachelorette parties during the summer that take the front of the building. There was a movie shot there, The Unicorn, where they took the property. But I don't foresee anything changing at all from what we have.
No splash house type of...
Splash House, they stay at the property. The people that run Splash House stay there for each session in the summer, so the 2 times in the summer. So they actually book the entire property to go play their music at the other hotels.
Okay, that's great.
Good setup for us.
Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate that. You know, with the no more questions of the applicant, I'll close the public hearing, and it's now open for discussion amongst my fellow commissioners. Any comments? Commissioner Song.
I think the project is well presented, and the fact that the management and the staff is so present, I think from the time that I've been here to hear a tenant, speak so positively about how well the place is run, I think tells the synergy that's happening with the ownership and the management. So having said that, I say that we approve according to staff comments and let them do some business.
Great. Commissioner Donovan?
I'll second that.
Oh, it's first and second. Great. Any more discussion on the project? Okay, please vote. It passes unanimously. Congratulations. Okay, we're going to move on. The next item on our agenda is item 2B, which is a request by Stephen Nieto of Southwest Concepts Incorporated on behalf of Pamela House. Pamplemousse, is that how you pronounce it? Pamplemousse, thank you. Palm Springs LLC for a conditional use permit to allow for a cocktail lounge within an existing mixed-use building at same address, 140 West Villalobos, Suite A. Can we have a staff report, please?
Thank you. This is a proposed conditional use permit approval request for a new cocktail lounge, Pamplemousse, within an existing mixed-use building. The project site is the same as the Twist. As the staff mentioned earlier, the zone designation on this property is split into R2 and C1, and this commercial suite is actually located within the C1 portion of the property. The tenant space was previously occupied by an art gallery called the Jackson Gallery, and the space is 1,245 square feet. The applicant is proposing to utilize the space to establish a Type 48 cocktail lounge In addition to the interior space, the applicant is also proposing the use of an outdoor patio space, which is 270 square feet. And the mixed-use building, which accommodates 5 commercial suites and a twist, and the total floor area is 34,128 square feet. The cocktail lounge will accommodate 31 interior spaces, and the space will also have a bar area, a seating area, and a DJ booth, as well as an employee restricted only area in the back. And outdoor patio area is 270 square feet, and it will accommodate the drink bar and 8 seats. The business will operate from 4:30 p.m. to midnight, Monday through Wednesday, and the schedule will be from 4 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. Thursday through Sunday. And based on the description provided by the applicant, the business will be a bespoke craft cocktail lounge in an upscale environment. As mentioned in the earlier project, this property has a rear parking lot, which is on a separate parcel. So right now, the site only has 8 parking spaces that can be utilized by the patrons of the prospective business. And the required parking spaces, although the outdoor patio area does not meet the definition of a floor area, the project proposes to use the 270 square feet of patio space. The previous use, the art gallery, utilized 1,245 square feet of space, and the proposed use will add 270 square feet, which is the patio area. And we do have a stipulation in the zoning code which states that the building or uses which have insufficient off-street parking per the requirements of this zoning code shall not be expanded unless sufficient additional parking spaces can be provided in accordance with the standards of this code. And based on the calculation, 270 square foot addition, the business will be required to provide 1 additional parking space. And staff recommends that this issue to be addressed as a specific parking plan, which is included in the conditions of approval. In reviewing the application, staff finds that the proposed project is consistent with the intent of the general plan, generally meets the applicable zoning regulations. The project will not cause negative impact on existing and future land uses because there will be a conditions of approval imposed on the project, which include no outdoor entertainment and outdoor amplified music, and the operation will be required to conform to the applicable noise ordinance regulations, and a specific parking plan will be required to address the parking deficiency issue. And for the reason staff recommends the Planning Commission to consider the approval of the project. Earlier this morning, the Director of Planning Services and myself met with a concerned local resident who pointed out that there's an employee parking on the adjacent street, which also lacks adequate signage. And with this into consideration, the staff actually recommends addition to this condition of approval and add planning condition number 12, which stipulates no employee parking shall be permitted on any residential street in the neighborhood. And
That I didn't get. What was the additional? Oh.
Did you have more to add to the staff report?
excuse me?
Great, thank you very much. I want to thank you very much also for your great slide and showing the parking and how it works and what's existing there and the expansion. That's very helpful. At this point, we'll open it to questions of the commission. Commissioner Hirschbein?
Do other commercial enterprises within the city prohibit on-street parking?
One of the issues that we're seeing, particularly along North Palm Canyon, we have a number of buildings that have insufficient parking based on current standards and uses. We have begun to do specific parking plans for a number of restaurants there. And as a condition of approval, one of the things we are adding is to prohibit employee parking in the residential neighborhoods. That seems to be where we get many of the complaints that we have relative to those businesses on North Palm Canyon. So this is something that we're starting to implement as a condition of a specific parking plan. We're also requesting the business owner to inform their employees of those requirements. As Ms. Kikuchi mentioned, we did meet with a member of the public this morning who had concerns about the signage on the residential streets in the neighborhood. And what we will do is work with the engineering department to see how we might sign those streets better in order to keep those available for the residents as opposed to having commercial traffic back in the residential neighborhoods.
What would such a sign indicate?
It's a limitation on the hours that you can park there. You know, typically employees have 6-8 hour shifts, something along those lines. And by limiting the number of hours that you can park there, that typically directs employees to a long-term parking situation. And as part of a specific parking plan, again, we're looking to use shared parking arrangements where there's office space or a business that doesn't have evening hours. That becomes a perfect opportunity for employees to use those spaces where there's approval granted to do so.
And the other question I wanted to ask is, you may have to get into the realm of hypothetical in answering this, but I'm very interested in knowing what sort of what could a specific parking plan include that would alleviate or mitigate against too few parking spaces under the code?
What we typically do, again, looking at buildings that are non-conforming as to parking, legally non-conforming as to parking, or there's an intensification of the use. And typically that's what happens when you see a restaurant that occupies a building that previously has been a retail use. So what we have them do is enter into a long-term agreement to use parking spaces on an adjacent property, as I had mentioned, something like an office use or a retail use that isn't open in the evenings. And so they're guaranteed X number of spaces on the adjacent property. They can either use that for staff parking, they can use that for valet parking for their customers. One of the examples, the 849 restaurant has a specific parking plan in place. They have a long-term agreement with the church that's immediately to the northwest of them, and so they use that for customer parking through a valet parking plan. So that's just an example of one of the specific parking plans that we've approved. But again, we tailor it based on the business and where these spaces are available and what the impacts are to adjacent properties.
And I know we've looked at this before in terms of distance from the commercial unit to the parking. All those kind of things will be looked at when it's presented. And would a building permit allowed to be issued? Would a building permit be allowed to be issued prior to a parking plan being approved?
The way we have this in the conditions of approval is that no, we can't issue the business license for the business until the specific parking plan is approved.
But the building permit could be.
They can begin working on the building, but again, they can't open the business until they have the parking in place.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Donenfeld.
Lynn, I understand we're very concerned about parking counts, and I get the math of this presentation. But are we not also concerned about transportation safety on these streets that we're parking? The reason I say that is I'm very familiar with Lola. It's close to my neighborhood. I use it a lot. It's a very narrow street. There's parking on both sides. Very often, it's impossible for two cars going either direction to even get through there. And also, there's a stoplight there, and sometimes the cars will park to the point where they're slightly into the Palm Canyon line of sight, and it's quite dangerous to even make a turn there. And I'm wondering, in making an analysis of these cases, does transportation get into it at all, just to see whether from a traffic safety standpoint, this all makes sense, because I'm very concerned about that Lola. It's very, very congested right at that block.
Yeah, certainly we do take that into consideration, especially when we're looking at something like a valet parking plan where you have employees circulating through the neighborhood and things like that. We want to reduce the impacts to residential neighborhoods. So as part of the specific parking plan, especially where there's a valet parking component to it, we look at the path of travel and include that as one of the conditions or one of the stipulations in the approval of that parking plan.
Has anyone analyzed this particular block for transportation safety?
I don't know that we have yet, but once the applicant selects the off-site parking, we'll do that analysis at that point in time.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hudson.
Lynn, has the city initiated any study or any discussion even of permit parking in some of these neighborhoods?
We have talked about it on a couple of occasions, looking at a couple of specific situations. There's also a study that's ongoing looking at parking requirements in general along the Palm Canyon corridor, because there are concerns with the number of parking spaces that are available for visitors and patrons of our restaurants and other businesses there in that area. We haven't proceeded with a permit parking program yet, but I think it's something that the City Council may consider here in the near future, just based on some of the discussions that have occurred at City Council meetings.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I do have a question for staff. Thank you. The parking plan that's coming forward, and I've done tons of parking plans that are where residential is budding commercial. It's the same thing we have here, and we added things in like the employees would park at the off-site lot. We would add in things, there needs to be a sign and all the print material needs to show where the parking is. Staff can add that type of stuff to the parking plan that's submitted.
Yes, we could, and if you want to include that as a condition of approval, we'd be more than happy to accept that as one of the conditions.
Great. Is there any more questions of staff? Hearing no questions of staff, I open the public hearing. Is the applicant present? If you'd come to the mic and state your name, you'll have 10 minutes.
Steven Nieto, a project designer with SWC. Thank you all for being here. I think you heard from the Twist management team that this is a dynamic and exciting site for a use of a craft cocktail lounge such as what we're providing. We think that the uses will supplement the uses of the future hotel there. Regarding the issue of parking, we are not expanding anything on the interior. It's the exact same space. We're just converting it to a craft cocktail lounge. The trigger for one parking space was from the exterior use of the patio, which is 270 square feet. That seats about 8 people. You know, the Twist is, as you know, is fully built out, and it's maxed to parking capacity. You know, the project is located in the Uptown Design District. It's sort of a walkable neighborhood. We're certainly promoting usage of bikes, of people walking from the hotel, from the local residential area. We really do anticipate this cocktail lounge to be a real staple of the community. It's supposed to be high-end. It's going to be very branded, very unique. I don't think there's anything going to be like it in Palm Springs. We think it's a little bit counterintuitive to provide more parking for sort of a drinking establishment, and more asphalt parking for that matter. You know, we're providing 270 square feet of space for almost equal amount of parking, and I'm just asking for the Planning Commission to rethink the need for a specific parking plan for one space. I guess that's it. I'm here for any questions if anybody has any.
All right, thank you. We may call you back up for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience that is here to speak on the project? Can you come to the mic and state your name? And you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Hi, Alan Ravert, 225 West Villalobos. I bought the property in 2004 from the Houstons, Jim and Jackie Lee. Never had a problem until 2015 when Bootlegger opened, and Ernest Coffee open. Their employees constantly park on, which is actually my property, because the first 6 feet of the street I own, the city does not maintain, and the city does not take care of. There's people out there drinking at nighttime. They leave their beer bottles, their trash everywhere. They smoke pot, they carry on. You have bridesmaids that gather there. They change their clothes. They block my gates. They block the service gates so the gardeners can't get in, the pool people can't get in. It's a constant problem. My house has been broken into since the bootlegger opened in 2015, 2017, and in April. So after living there for 10 years, my house was never broken into until this development was redeveloped. So I'm not necessarily against it, but, you know, for the applicant to say that there's not going to be really increase, that's not true. To this commissioner's comment about how narrow the street is at Villalobos and Palm Canyon, it's a mess and it's dangerous. There shouldn't be parking allowed so close to the stoplight like he suggested. The Ubers and limousines pull up and block the street entirely. You can't even get through the street. It's not a good situation. I provided some photos. So there's one that shows the gate of my house, so you can kind of see it. It's about 250 feet of frontage. So it's a large parcel, and it's a long area that I have to, you know, maintain and I have trouble accessing. So I would ask that the signs that are there be put in a logical fashion on the street, because when you call for parking enforcement, they say, well, it's at the beginning of Camino del...
Alan, can you start wrapping up for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
So I'm asking for a couple of things. One's that the signage be properly distributed upon the street so people can see it, because parking enforcement says that they can't enforce it because people don't know that you can't park there for more than 2 hours. And the signage needs to be changed from 9 o'clock until 9 o'clock, and employees shouldn't be allowed to park on the street either.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. We appreciate hearing from you. Is there anyone else here who wants to speak on the project? Seeing none, if the applicant wants to come back up, you'll have 2 minutes for a rebuttal. Did you want to offer anything else? No, you can come up and make a, before we do that, then come up and make a comment before the rebuttal.
Just in terms of the applicant, one of the owners is also a co-owner of Ernest Coffee and Bootlegger. And as a tenant, they have been phenomenal in terms of being cooperative with the guests that are upstairs, with music. They have outdone really our expectations from the get-go, what they created on that corner. When we did revive the property, probably had the only place that we had commercial interest early on was that corner unit where Ernest Coffee is. I probably took about 10 to 15 LOIs for galleries, but we wanted the vibrancy and we wanted a coffee shop. And so we felt very fortunate in terms of meeting Gregory, who's one of the partners in Pamplemousse, and seeing his vision for what he wanted on that corner. And again, they exceeded it. And so when they approached me in terms of adding a new space, taking over the Al Jackson Gallery, I thought it seemed natural in terms of their professionalism and how well they've executed in every other function. Also, just in terms of parking, you know, I live in the neighborhood too, and you know, where the Jim's house is, I mean, that's on the west side of Centro, which I don't understand anyone parking up there in the neighborhood. at all, because that's about a 5-minute walk, so that wouldn't seem to make that much sense to me. And I do go by that property regularly, and the cars, are not really lined up on Villola past more than, beyond the twist, what I've typically seen. And most people that do go there are Airbnb or walking, and it serves the neighborhood. So I just wanted to vouch for the proprietors applying, and that's it.
Thank you, Tim. Now, the applicant, you'll have 2 minutes to make any comments you have.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate the unique sort of dynamic urban mix of housing, hotel, restaurant, and cocktail lounge in this area that is the appeal to this particular area of Palm Springs. Regarding the sort of the loitering and the potential drinking, I mean, us as the applicant and designers, we've gone to, we've actually got rid of a planter wall that was up there because the tenants didn't want people loitering or hanging out outside smoking cigarettes. So we've added hedging and signage to eliminate the sort of loitering that would happen in front of the bar and keep that inside the patio. So we did think about that, and we did actually design around potential for people to hang out and smoke and things like that in front of the bar. So I'm here for any questions
Right.
from the commission.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the commissioners to the applicant? Commissioner Song.
Mr. Nieto, couple of questions on your design. So you plan to use the composite wood siding product,
That's right.
right? And so you have this vertical spacing at your stackable windows, and then you have horizontal spacing at the door. That switch in pattern, was that intentional? What did you have in mind?
That's a design decision that we chose to delineate the difference between the front door and the patio space.
But are you furring that out further out so that you can see that it's a
No,
stronger?
it's a siding material that's composite wood that holds up against the south-facing sun, which we do have a harsh south-facing there. So it will be mechanically adhered with clips and attachments, and it is, an approved siding material.
I understand, but so you wanted to differentiate where the entrance door is in compared to the stackable doors, correct?
Right.
Okay, but isn't most of the time the stackable doors going to be open?
No.
It's not?
Maybe if the weather's good, but for the most part, it'll be closed with the AC on, I imagine.
Okay, got it. And then on the underside of that roof soffit, what material do you plan to?
The same wood siding that would wrap and enclose the space.
So you
Same
would have it
material.
on the soffit side?
Correct.
on the
We-
underside as
We would
well.
be consistent and seamless with the material as it's sort of applied to the interior of the space there. And through the architectural review committee, we actually worked through these details a lot, and we came up with corner details, trim details on how to address the fascia and how the wood wraps the corner.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, conditional use permit, I thought I get to go at it. Okay, all
We're
right.
letting you talk for a while. Maria was on the AAC for quite some time.
Okay, and you're turning the corners as well?
We're addressing all those
Okay.
design decisions, yeah.
All right. So as far as the sort of, I think you described that you didn't want to have people loitering or smoking in front of you. And that's the reason why you took sort of I hate to say the word, but sort of the historic flat stones on that low bench. So if you see your A30, you have a low bench.
It may be historic. It's also just sort of, we went through this with the architectural review committee, and they sort of agree that the stone low wall was not in sort of on brand with the look and the interior of the bar. So they felt that it was okay to put a wood siding and use a ficus hedge to help create that separation between the public and private space.
And okay, and so that hedge is like a good 2 feet.
Yeah, it's actually uniquely designed and grown, and we'll actually have signage incorporated into the hedge.
Oh, wow. Can't wait to see it.
Me
Okay.
too, thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions of an applicant? Yes, Commissioner Garner.
No. During the day, it's operating as a craft cocktail lounge all the time. And in the day, it'll be happening inside. And, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem.
Any more questions of the applicant? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and I'll open it for commission to discussion. I do have a question of staff before we start. Is it common or has it been practiced to require a security plan for a drinking establishment of this size?
Let's see, I don't know that we have. In certain cases, for certain types of cocktail lounges, we have the larger ones. This size, I don't believe that we have. I don't have Mr. Newell here, so he's the one who has the most experience. But typically, no, we haven't required it on the smaller locations.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Song.
Yeah, I had a question for Flynn, although it's kind of a little bit out of sequence. On this project for the hotel and housing, we couldn't use the half a space per room parking assignment and see if we can use their parking spaces to dedicate them to staff?
I'm trying to think if we looked at the mixed-use parking requirement. Okay, so the requirement for 58 spaces was based on the mixed-use requirement, but still there's an additional space that's going to be needed for the cocktail lounge. And based on some of the comments that we've received relative to impacts, it would be helpful to have some additional parking, especially for the employees.
Right. I was coming more from a place where they do have a dedicated parking space. If we have zones for staff that they park within the parking site and not on the street, and that leaves it more for the public to be closer to the businesses. But I stand corrected, 58 spaces are required for both projects.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any more comments? Commissioner Hudson, Commissioner Donenfeld.
This really pains me because I love the project, the entire project that Mr. Brinkman's put together. I really don't think we need another bar on this corner. If you look at the project, you've got 2 bars already. You've got the Tiki Bar and you've got the Mexican restaurant around the corner on Palm Canyon. This is a very neighborhood. I realize we're dealing with a commercial strip right here, but it really abuts a very large and special neighborhood. And I think it's already commercial enough. The street really can't accommodate the traffic that it currently has. And I understand some people will Uber, but other people will be looking for parking spaces. I just think that I don't see it enhancing the feel of the neighborhood, the upper design district, or anything about it. There are just plenty of bars wherever you look. So unfortunately, for these reasons, and not strictly related to the code, I just think it's an inappropriate use given the nature of this neighborhood for another bar. So I would have to oppose it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Hirschbein.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you on that one. I don't know that there's too many. I don't know how many is too many bars. And I would trust staff to come up to approve a parking plan that can mitigate a lot of these concerns. We can go to limited parking on the street, limited hours of parking on the street, limited time amount of parking on the street, distribution of no parking signs or parking limitation signs, prohibition of employee parking. There's a lot of tools in the box that staff can use, and I think, Dennis, you've pointed out a few in your experience as well that I think should go to mitigating it. And I don't see. I mean, if you want to go to where there's too many bars, you can go, a mile or so south of this location. But in that location, I don't really see it as sort of party central. To me, it's a still relatively quiet area. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Vice Chair Maruzzi.
I just want to better understand this requirement for an additional space. Where would that space come from?
Again, going back to the idea of a specific parking plan, the applicant would need to locate parking spaces available on an adjacent property and use a shared parking arrangement. So again, looking at an adjacent office or retail space that's available in the evenings.
That would be for the additional space.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Exactly.
I thought it would take it up to code compliance. Is that not correct?
Because this is specific to this particular use, where it's an intensification of use, they have to provide for the additional space that's required just for the lounge space. However, as looking at that specific parking plan, we would want to address staff parking as well.
Just for that staff?
Yeah, I think it's important looking at this entire mixed-use project to make sure that we're not impacting the neighborhood.
So how would you do that, knowing that you're already at a deficit?
Again, by looking for spaces on an adjacent property, which...
No, I got that, but you preface this whole thing by saying you could only mitigate what their impact will be, this specific tenant's impact would be, and not what the impact of the entire project would be. So how many spaces are you looking to provide them in this specific plan?
What we will look for is something that can accommodate the staff for this particular business so that there's enough spaces for customers in the remaining spaces, either on the street or in the lot that they have. So again, we're going to look at the specific needs of the business. And
So staff plus the one space?
Yeah.
That's sort of the math we would be doing?
Yeah.
Okay, and is it staff parking one for one? Is there any formula? Or do you
There
just-
isn't in our code, but again, with a specific parking plan, we can look at the hours of operation of the business, the employees that will be on hand for the business, those types of things. We go into a little bit additional detail than we wouldn't otherwise do under the standard code.
Right, okay, thanks.
Commissioner Maruzzi.
I know that it was once Don the Beachcomber back in the 50s and 60s. It was very popular, and it was a drinking establishment that had far more customers than this will, these two side-by-side bars. So had that business continued to this day, there would be a lot of people drinking there, a lot more than now. So I can imagine that it's probably appropriate, given its original use, that it remain a bar, the area.
Thank you. Any more? Commissioner Garner.
Have a concern about too many bars as well. I will say this area is fairly quiet in comparison to the rest of the area, but it is something to consider as we get more and more applications for bars in the city. Something to
you.
think about.
Commissioner Song, did you have anything?
Yeah, I think I'm in support of the project in caveat with the parking analysis and study. And I know that the applicants have mentioned that, for one space, they strongly suggest not to have this parking study. But if the applicant wants to change so that the outdoor is not used as part of the restaurant, that will diminish the amount of square footage for business as well. So this is not a one solution to this project.
Okay. Commissioner Hudson.
I'd like to go back to the 5 spaces, parking spaces along Camino del Corte. If I recall, we've reviewed other projects. I think Black House was mentioned. And if I recall, maybe I'm mistaken, but on some of those projects, we included street parking spaces as part of the parking requirement. Getting a nod from Mr. Newell. So I just would like to go back to you know, if it's one space or two space that's tilting this project, I would like to propose that we use precedent and say that, you know, 5 spaces basically could be utilized for this project and for the Twist project.
I'd like to, was that a question you were asking, or?
It was a question, but I got a head nod, so I guess I was. But, it was a comment too, I guess, that those 5 spaces be considered as part of the requirement based on precedent.
Commissioner Hirschbein.
Well, I think those 5 spaces could be included, but I wouldn't necessarily include them in the application for this establishment. The 5 spaces could be included for the overall site, but it doesn't diminish the need to provide the additional space for this establishment, nor would it diminish the need to provide parking for the staff. So I agree. I don't say that it shouldn't be included, but it shouldn't be a condition that would mitigate against the specific parking plan.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add that there's always a rub when you have something like a bar next to a residential area, and that rub comes in many ways. One, it can be as simple as dumping bottles out at 1 in the morning, and you don't want that noise to be heard by neighbors that are sleeping. You also have what we heard from testimony, people that wander into neighborhoods and look for free, easy parking and do other things that they do that. But I think a parking plan is more than just for one space. I think we need to look at a parking operation plan for the entire business. And that would be, like we talked about, no employee parking in the neighborhood and some other restrictions. I would just ask that parking operation plan to be more robust than looking at just one space that's off-site. And I think that that parking operation plan tied to the CUP very clearly when we write it, if there are problems, it gives the city a hook to go in and basically rectify those problems in a regulatory manner. So with that, are there any more comments? Do I have a motion on the?
Yeah, I'll try it. I like your idea about making it a more comprehensive plan. Are we allowed to require that with the application of just the cocktail lounge?
Yes. What we will do under planning condition number 11, we'll incorporate your comments that the specific parking plan is to address the full operation of the business and address the parking needs for that business and the additional impacts that may result from that particular development. In addition, we will tie this to the conditional use permit as Chair Woods has suggested. And so violation of the parking plan will result as a violation of the conditions of approval, if you will.
But I believe Chair Woods was trying to indicate that the parking plan should include employee parking for the rest of the staff of the building. Is that?
Yeah, it should be comprehensive.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is that something?
Yes.
We can include as part of our condition?
Yes, we will.
So, good. I think it'll be if all goes well and the parking plan's a robust one and is adhered to, it should actually improve the situation that's there now.
Okay, do I hear a motion in that?
So that would be my motion.
Staff recommendation with the caveat of changing the parking plan to be for shortness to be robust.
That it include provisions for off-site parking for employees of the entire building.
Can we?
That's what you were indicating?
Flynn, can we just, I think we've indicated they cannot park on the street.
Correct.
Right, and I think that would mean the parking plan is going to have to come up with them parking somewhere else.
Right.
Other than the street.
Right.
So the parking plan would have to address that.
Right. Yes. I don't know, does anybody have any other conditions they want to add to that?
Okay, do I hear a second? Okay,
I'll second.
Can you please vote? Okay, the motion passes. Congratulations. I hope you operate in a very neighborly way and that you're an asset to our community. So thank you very much for doing business here. Okay, we're going to move on to the next public hearing, item 2C. This is Baked Betty's LLC for conditional use permit to allow cannabis manufacturing within an existing multi-tenant building at 781 South Williams Road. Can we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Planning Commissioners. So this item before you is a request to occupy an existing 1,000 square foot tenant space within the existing light industrial park, as you see here on the screen. So the property is located at 781 South Williams Road. The tenant space is located towards the rear of this property, as you see on this exhibit here on the screen, in the rear parking area for the property. As I said, this is an existing building, and what you see on the screen here are just some existing photographs of the exterior as well as the interiors where the entries are to the tenant space. It is a multi-tenant center, so it is addressed from 755 to 781 on South Williams Road. So you see on the screen here, the site plan shows all the different division of tenant spaces that exist. Staff included in your report on page 2 a mix of the current tenant spaces that are occupying the property that we were aware of at the time of this writing this report. But I would note that there are some pending cannabis applications with the Office of Special Programs at this time. So I'll get into a bit of that a little bit later in my presentation. So the proposed tenant, as I said, would occupy 1,000 square feet. The floor plan includes the office space, includes an office space, a lobby, restroom, packaging area, and the kitchen, and that is towards the rear of the business. The applicant has received their regulatory permit from the Office of Special Programs, as well as their state licenses that are required. So they intend to operate a type N infused edible manufacturing and infusing edibles in accordance with state law and local laws. They do not intend to use any volatile solvents or include any hazardous substances on the property. In general, basically, they are primarily looking to bake edibles as part of their operation, as well as create some of the base concentrates that go into those edibles. They would also provide packaging, on-site storage, and some self-transportation and distribution of the goods that they make. So that's their description of the proposed operation. The business is located within the industrial general plan land use designation, and it would be consistent with uses commonly found in that designation. The zoning of the property is M1, which is the service manufacturing zone, and cannabis manufacturing is specifically permitted with the approval of the CUP, so that is why this request is before you. In terms of cannabis facility separation and saturation requirements, the service manufacturing M1 zone does not have any separation requirements from other cannabis facilities. So there are no minimum separation from the business from the surrounding area or from other cannabis businesses in the surrounding area. So that is not a requirement for the M1 zone. There are requirements for separation from other sensitive uses such as playgrounds, public parks, daycare facilities, and youth centers, and that's a minimum of 600 feet. So there are none within that 600-foot perimeter or buffer of the site. The closest residence is 400 feet to the west of the property line, as well as the closest school, which is Cielo Vista Charter, is over 1,000 feet to the northwest of the property. The closest park is 1,100 feet to the south, and that's Demuth Park. In terms of the ventilation and odor control issues that we commonly have run into with cannabis businesses, The applicant has submitted an odor control plan to the city. That plan has been approved by the city's odor consultant, and they have to implement that prior to commencing operations. Should the commission approve this today, staff does recommend 3 conditions specifically related to odor control. Those are planning conditions PLN 2, PLN 3, and PLN 5. And those are specifically to ensure that if there are any odor issues, that they are addressed immediately, and that any violation of those conditions could result in revocation of this CUP. For on-site parking, the property has a total of 35 parking spaces, 10 of which are located as along the frontage as bay parking, and 25 are directly in front of the business in the parking lot. The site does not have any handicap parking spaces, so staff is recommending as a part of the conditions in your draft resolution that the applicant do improve one of the parking spaces to be ADA accessible, a handicap space. So that would improve the property to comply with ADA requirements. The number of parking spaces for the site under the zoning code does comply with section 9306 off-street parking standards, where a minimum of 33 parking spaces is required, and they have, as I said, a total of 35. So staff has made recommended findings in your report and as well included in your draft resolution that the proposal is consistent with the CUP standards, and the business is specifically permitted, as I mentioned, in the M1 zone. There is adequate parking, and we do feel that we can adequately address the odor concerns with the conditions that we have before you. So we have prepared a draft resolution of approval for your review consideration. And the only other couple of things I just want to follow up with, in addition to the report, are we did receive two public letters of public correspondence, 1 email and 1 letter. 1 email was kind of general question about the number of cannabis businesses in the city, just a kind of a comment on that from Ms. Ploss, and then the other was a letter from a tribe basically stating that they had no comments on this item. At the request of one of the planning commissioners, I did prepare a cannabis map, so I did hand that out to you just before we started at the meeting today. And basically what it does show is the area zoned M1 between Vela Road and Gene Autry, as well as between Ramon Road and Mesquite Avenue. So that's surrounded in green on the map that you have. As you may recall, the City Council adopted a moratorium on any future cannabis uses within a portion of this area, specifically between Camino Paracela and Sunny Dunes. So you see that as kind of the orange highlight or salmon highlight, whatever color you want to call it, on the map. And that, this proposed project is outside of that area, so it would not be affected by the moratorium. I'd also attached to the map is the list of cannabis permittees and applications that we have with the Office of Special Programs. So you can see that we have a number of applications that have been submitted. 2 of the ones that are operational are highlighted in green on the list. So that's Organic Solutions of the Desert. And then LDGA NBW LLC is also in operation at this time. So Baked Betty's is the applicant highlighted in yellow in the project before you. It does require a CUP. I would note that not all of these on the list require a CUP. It would not necessarily have to come before the Planning Commission for consideration. So it would ultimately depend on the use that is being proposed as to whether or not the Commission would review each of these applications. But in general, a manufacturing business, a cultivation business, those types of uses do require a conditional use permit and would have to come before the Planning Commission prior to any commencement of operations. So I hope that answers some questions about the number of businesses currently in that area, as well as the number that we may see down the line in the future. But at this time, we have, as I said, 2 operational. This would be the 3rd applicant that is basically in line to come forward. So I'll conclude with that. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is here. Thank you.
Thank you, planner. Thank you actually very much for the map. It's very helpful in our deliberations here. But Commissioner Maruzzi.
I'm just trying to better understand the moratorium. Why did the council implement this moratorium on this area?
Council was concerned about issues of concentration and odor in 2 areas of the city. One was in the Desert Highlands Gateway neighborhood, and the second was the Demuth Park neighborhood. In establishing the boundaries for the moratorium, they looked at the number of applications we had received and determined that they would confine the moratorium to the area that Mr. Newell described, which is the area between Sunny Dunes and Camino Paracela on the north and south, and between Vela Road and Gene Autry on the east and west.
I'm thinking about what you just said as relates to the reasoning. It seems to me the concentration now is just move south, and they may address it again, but at this point, I guess it's not part of the moratorium area. So, thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Hirschbein.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. If they're concerned about odor escaping into the Demuth Park residential area, why would they have omitted the part, the M1 zone area to this, up to Mesquite?
Not having been involved with the creation of those boundaries, I'm assuming that they didn't have applications at that point in time, or a significant number of applications at that point in time in that area.
So it just had to do with the number of applications?
Yeah, I believe so,
Not
yes.
whether facilities in those areas might impact
Yeah.
the neighborhood? Okay.
Yeah.
The odor consultant, did the odor consultant visit the site?
I'm not sure that, I'm not aware if they did or did not.
Okay. Did staff?
Yes.
And did staff notice any issues regarding the integrity of the envelope of the building?
No.
So the photo you included in the report that shows the interior look at the, I have to, hang on, rifle through this. It's on the second page of the photos, and it's from the interior showing the roll-up door, which rolls up into the production area of the facility. It looks like you can see daylight over the header of the door. Is that the case?
I'm not sure. The applicant may be able to clarify that.
Do you see what I'm referring to there?
I do, yeah.
Okay. And so the odor consultant, if they had not made a site visit, could not include the integrity of the envelope of the building as part of their analysis. Is that correct?
It's possible, yeah.
I mean, if they weren't there, then they couldn't do that, right? Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, unless they had specific knowledge as this being an issue or these photographs.
Right. And as part of the overall HVAC and fire control of the building, do the demising walls extend to the structure, or do they stop short of the structure?
I'm not certain on the structural details.
Well, I'm not talking about the structural details. I'm just talking about the demising walls. That is the walls, but the intertenancy walls. Do they extend up to the underside of the roof, or do they extend just up to the just above the ceiling?
I haven't been inside the tenant space. I don't know.
Okay, those are my questions. Thanks.
Commissioner Donenfeld.
I have a related question to Mr. Hirschbein's question, and that is, maybe I'm losing it, but I don't recall us ever seeing in other reports regarding cannabis proposed facilities this notion of a city's odor consultant. Is this someone new? Is this someone who's on staff or someone who we consult with? And wouldn't it be appropriate if there is an odor consultant with respect to these facilities, like a CEQA report, that we see the odor consultant and be able to question him or her as to some of the things Mr. Hirschbein is questioning? Because I think, as we've seen in other facilities, the leakage and the way the building is wrapped and constructed is very critical to whether there'll be any seepage of odor, and it would be nice to have the expert here to question him or her about some of these questions.
In terms of the city's odor control consultant, that's hard to get out, the city hired a firm to do review of odor control plans for cannabis facilities, I believe back in around November or so of last year. We have since ended our contract with that consultant and entered into a new contract with a new consultant, and they are the ones who are responsible for reviewing all odor control plans that are submitted by our permittees. Now, under their contract with the city, the city has not authorized the consultant to actually spend time and come here and testify at meetings. So that's something that we may need to ask for in the future, but is not currently under our budget as available to have them here at the meetings. One of the things to talk about relative to the odor control plan is it assumes that the building is airtight, that the odor control system does not function if it is not. And so the questions relative to the roll-up door and the fact that you can see daylight, Chair Woods and I also noticed that yesterday, it will require that door to be sealed so that the HVAC system works properly and will function to the specifications that our odor control consultant has put forth.
See, those are very relevant answers to our concerns, because what the public seems to be most concerned about with respect to these facilities is the odor.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big issue. So I think we're a little preoccupied with odor questions, and it would be nice to have the person. I can't believe that the consultant doesn't go on site and actually visit the property in question, because some of these questions can't be answered unless you do a physical inspection.
We'll certainly put that forward to our City Council subcommittee. As I've mentioned in the past, we are looking at revisions to our zoning ordinance and also to our administrative regulations, and so perhaps that's something that we can include in that discussion.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Murphy.
I feel exactly as Commissioner Donenfeld. We seem to have questions of the odor consultant whenever one of these projects is proposed. And is it because they're located in Northern California or outside of this region?
Actually, the new one that we have is no longer in Northern California. The new consultant that we have, I believe, is in Ventura County.
How much closer?
Well, Santa Rosa is a lot further away than Ventura.
Don't any of them exist in the Coachella Valley or in Riverside County? It seems odd to me.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, not to be rude, but it's an appropriate response that, well, you know, we negotiated a deal, so we're kind of stuck with it until the next budget cycle.
Well, keep in mind that planning staff did not negotiate the contract. That's done through the city manager's office.
Where's Dave Rady when you need him? So, but seriously, wouldn't the planning department make their recommendation as to whether or not the consultant who is consulting for the planning department have to appear or at least inspect the building?
They are not consulting for the planning department. They consult for the Office of Special Programs.
Okay, so it would have had to be that office that made the request that the consultant appear.
Mm-hmm.
I see. All right, thank you.
And just before we move on, just if staff could clarify the process the applicant has already gone through. I think staff did this in the staff report, but if they could do it again, just the process the applicant actually goes through before they even arrive here at the Planning Commission.
Sure. Yeah. So at the very beginning, they have to, of course, get their tenant space. So they go through the negotiations with the property owners, various property owners on the spaces that they finally select. They go through the application process with both the city's Office of Special Programs and the state license board that issues licenses for cannabis businesses. So they go through those two license processes. Then they come through planning to get their land use approval, as well as the building department. So this applicant has gone through all of those steps, except, of course, finalizing the land use approval as well as the building permit, but they are in the building permit process at risk at this time.
Thank you. And Commissioner Donenfeld, did you have?
I was wondering if it's not possible for the odor consultant to be here, perhaps it would be possible as part of the staff reports on these projects to have a written report from the odor consultant so that we can evaluate the report at least.
So the applicant did, or excuse me, the city did issue an approval letter on the odor control mitigation plan, and that was one of the attachments in your report. They do have a summary of what the application or what the applicant intends to do with the site, and then the findings that they make as a part of their review of the odor control mitigation plan, and then what requirements they would recommend. The odor control mitigation plan also includes an odor complaint form that the applicant would have to address in the instance that there are odor complaints for this business. So those are all mechanisms to ensure that odor mitigation is not, or is done correctly, and odor is not detected off-site.
Commissioner Gardner, did you have a question?
I also have a question about odor. What happens after someone vacates? So if we have these cannabis businesses that are there for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then they decide not to operate anymore, are there lingering odors? Do we know this? Do we have any idea?
I don't know that we have any idea on how, and it will ultimately be different for each tenant space and the type of cannabis use. We've seen that cultivation generally has the most impact in terms of odor and requires significant mitigation to reduce odor impacts. So in terms of remediation of the odor after they vacate, I'm not certain we have any answer to that question on how bad it could be.
Are there other questions of staff? Okay, Vice Chair Maruzzi.
Since we've just gone to districts, and in cities that have districts, you often ask the council member who represents that district if they support projects. What district is this in? Is it District 1? And we don't have any representation yet in District 1, so I guess there's nobody to ask. But in the future, once we have a representative of these various districts, would it be appropriate to ask for comments by the council member who represents that district?
That's really going to be up to the city how they want to conduct that internal business. If you want to solicit that from the council member, that certainly is within the city's prerogative to do, or alternatively not. The commission can certainly ask, and we can certainly bring this up with the city manager and the city council and see how they feel about that as well.
Okay, other questions of staff?
It wouldn't be every issue. I mean, I'm sure there's certain issues that the council members would want to comment on, this being one of them, since odor is something that comes up every time in neighborhood discussions of any of these facilities.
Mr. Vice Chair, I think the city could certainly do that. I think it's just a matter of getting everybody to sit down, talk, and work out the mechanics.
Okay, with no more questions of staff, I'd like to open the public hearing. And is the applicant in the audience? You have 10 minutes if you state your name. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Courtney Greenberg, co-owner of Baked Betty's. And the council has really made a lot of my points that I was going to make. As far as some of the questions in lingering odors, I think you asked. I'm sorry. For lingering odors, there's not any lingering odors as far as that. When you bake cookies, you know, it's the same thing. We are baking with a gas oven. We're infusing our butter with the cannabis. So the cannabis is either in a freezer or in a crock pot with our butter. At that time we bake, so the smell you might smell is that of brownies or snickerdoodles. And then in regards to the roll-up door that the light was coming through, that's because the drywall is not finished in the building, so the construction's not done for our tenant improvement, so there will be some issues with that, and we're in process of our permits at this time. And as far as the ceiling, the walls to the ceiling, I don't know who asked that question, I'm sorry. They don't go to the roof. They stop at the attic space, is what you're asking? Okay. But as far as Baked Betty's, we are a 1,000 square foot bakery, 380 feet in which is our baking area, our kitchen. And at that, we have 2 gas ovens, and they measure 6 foot in length. And we have a type 2 hood that is 8x4, so it's more than enough space for any odors that might happen from our baking. Also, we have 2 odor emitters or air purifiers that will be on in our operating hours. And also, we have odor emitters that will be dispersing every 30 minutes. Also, I wanted to point out that we only have 2 employees and 4 parking spaces, and that we are no storefront. So there'll be no traffic in the area. Nobody can just come into the store. It's just by retail orders. So at that, I don't have anything else because you did make, like I said, a lot of the comments that I was going to say. Did you have any questions for me?
We'll come back for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this project? If there's no one, come on back up and you'll have 2 minutes. Do you want to add anything else or just take some questions?
Well, at that, I'll just also add Baked Betty's. We have 64 products in total, and only 26 of which require baking. The others are melting chocolate in a crock pot or using a microwave. And that opening, we're only going to be having 7 products due to testing cost. It's very expensive to test each product, so we can't open with all of our products. And out of those 7 products that we'll be opening with, 2 in which will be baking. So like I said, who doesn't like the smell of a brownie? So, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Are there questions of the applicant? Commissioner Donovan.
I almost want to call you Betty, but you're not Betty.
Well, that's everyone asks, well, how'd you get the name? Is your middle name Betty? No, just call me Betty.
Betty and baking go together.
Yeah.
My question is your raw cannabis product then grass, weed, or is it an extract that you're using, an infusion?
It is actually either trim of the weed or the flower. And what we do is we decarb it. I'm not going to say it right. Decarb box it in the oven at a very low temperature and for a certain length of time. And after that process, we infuse it into our butter or oil, or we put it back in the freezer for use at a later time.
So if there's a smell being emitted that's cannabis-like, it's likely to come in the first stage of the process, right?
Correct. And that decarbing will be done probably twice a month. And we'll choose either early morning hours or after business hours. But no, it's not done daily.
And that's when your cold filter comes in and all the other protections you've put into it for odor control.
Correct.
Thank you.
No problem.
More questions of the applicant? Commissioner Song?
So David mentioned that at risk you have submitted plans to the building department.
Yes.
Okay, have you done the same thing to the Riverside County Health Department?
Riverside County Health Department is not involved with cannabis edibles. So we already are approved with the CDPH. We have been approved for the last 2 months, pending our cup approval as well.
Okay, and then was there a change on your oven being gas in the last few months, or
No, our
was it
oven's always been gas.
Okay, because your odor plan at the very end paragraph, it says the proposed project is a kitchen where edible cooking and similar baked products will be baked in electric ovens.
And that was on my part. That was just a typing error. Yeah, the ovens have always been gas.
Okay. And you do have gas connection as a tenant to
Yes, ma'am.
in the site. Okay. And when our fellow commissioner was asking about the walls that are separating your business to the business next door, you stated that the walls are framed to the ceiling and not to the what we call under the roof.
Correct.
The walls stop short.
That's what I mean, the walls are 9 feet, or the ceiling is 9 feet. And from what I'm envisioning is that it does stop. But we are also putting insulation in the walls and re-drywalling everything to prevent that odor from coming out, if any at all. But we do have a great relationship with all the other tenants in our facility, and there's no issues or concerns on their part. Even the tenants on the adjoining wall to us.
Okay. Do you have knowledge that that's also what is proposed on your construction plans? Sorry. Have you received any plan check corrections yet?
Yes, I have. I received them last week.
Okay.
And I'm not sure exactly what's on them. I don't really understand it. I just forwarded it to our architect.
Okay, got it. And do you know if you have an air conditioning system that only serves you as a tenant?
Yes, just serves us.
Okay, good.
It's our unit and it works very well.
Okay. And so in your floor plan, when you were showing that there's a lobby, is not for public use?
No, it is not. It's just in place for a break room where I'll have like a little bistro table. Somebody could take a break there or use the restroom and just sit down away from the packaging area or the kitchen.
So, okay, so
Because we do-
definitely not for retail use. In
No.
other words, I can't come knock on your door and then say, I want a brownie.
No, I won't let anybody in. We do have a very well in place security system. We'll have 6 cameras as well in the parking lot, all entrances and exits of the facility, but no public entrance whatsoever.
Okay, so your business is online shipping and so on?
No online. We're only manufacturing to local retails. I mean, it doesn't have to be local, but any state licensed retail or distribution center we can manufacture to, but there will be no online, no phone orders, no delivery. The only thing that will be leaving our facility is the cannabis in its final form, in the packaging, in totes, in our secured delivery van, and then driving to the retail.
Okay, so in your parking lot, when you open up your overhead door and then you're loading your merchandise, you are not concerned about security in the sense of being gated or enclosed?
We do have an enclosed area in the back, a facility where the roll-up door is, you see.
Yeah.
But as far as that, I don't have a concern because of the amount of cameras we do have in the facility, to where even if we went out the front door, I'm not concerned because we don't have any signage on the building as well. So it's not like people just know we're Baked Betty's and that we have the cannabis products. There's going to, I'm sure anything's public information, they can look it up and find it, but our sign's not going to be there. And also the items will be in totes that are oblique and nobody can just know what's in it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Gardner.
You mentioned the decarbing twice a month. So you'll have the product, so the weed will come into your facility and then twice a month you'll immediately take care of it, or will you have the weed, the plant or the flower just sitting around somewhere throughout the time?
Depending on the amount, say we were to get in, or the time frame, or what we're doing that day. If we're unable, my hope is to decarb it that same day. If not, it will go into a freezer, and they're all in sealed bags, airproof bags, into a locked freezer that no odor is going to come out of. So my hope is to do that, but I don't know that that's going to happen.
More questions of the applicant? Okay, hearing no questions, I'll close the public hearing and I'll open it for discussion amongst the planning commissioners at this point. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Song.
I want to go back to, I don't know how it works because the concern that few of the commissioners have about actually concealing the tenant space, so there's no leakage happening to the next door tenants. That can be done by continuous drywall barrier, both on the walls and on the underside of the roof. And normally that's an interior requirement that I'm not sure how we could structure that as a requirement. Because it's not a land use.
Let's ask the staff real quick. I think the question is it's really sealing off the space from the adjacent spaces by going all the way to the roof line versus the ceiling line?
I think what I would do in terms of a condition of approval is rather than specifying a detail, such as the drywall shall run all the way to the underside of the roof, I would just say that the space, the drywall needs to completely enclose the space and be adequately taped and seamed so that odors don't escape, or something along those lines. Is that you frame the condition so what the outcome is, rather than giving the architectural details.
But Director Fleck, we did specify details in a previous marijuana facility relative to penetrations through the exterior wall and so forth, specific things.
Yeah.
And I believe if we get specific about it, we'd have a better chance of it remaining successful. And the one thing I question, though, I don't know this building. I don't think any staff knows the building. The applicant knows it to a degree, but sometimes when you have these common attics, there's certain fire or HVAC requirements that take precedence over anything we would say about extending the deck to the roof. So in that case, if that was the case, you would need to sheetrock the ceiling. You'd have to take out the, you have to drop in a sheetrock ceiling, not a lay-in tile ceiling. And then extend any, it'd be like creating a 1 hour fire enclosure in that space. So it gets kind of technical, and it doesn't seem like, our staff or building department staff really looks at that. I mean, they would look at it from a 1 hour fire code protection. There's certain light fixtures you can use in the ceiling to maintain the 1 hour fire envelope. There's certain grills or duct configurations, et cetera. But with odor, there's no such regulatory infrastructure in place. So we're kind of, pardon the analogy, we're kind of shooting in the dark here as far as these requirements. And I don't know, like for instance, that roll-up door. There are roll-up doors that contain odors. I don't know if this one is, and I don't know what the spec on one is. And that roll-up door goes right to the production facility. So once that door is open, no matter what you did on the drywall wouldn't matter. And so there's protocols for a lot of things in the code for fire protection, electrical protection, et cetera. And we have staff in building and fire department and other agencies that look at that, but we don't have that kind of regulatory infrastructure for the odor, which is the problem with these facilities. And I'm a little bit flummoxed, if that's a word, as to how to proceed with this. I know this is a relatively small operation, and it's obviously a small business person pursuing her dream on this, but the fact that the moratorium kind of cuts a couple of feet to the north of this property, to me indicates that the area is still under somewhat of a I'm going to say something again, a cloud, as far as overuse of this of saturation of this use. I'm not convinced, I guess, as you can hear in my voice and what I'm saying.
Commissioner Hudson.
I have a question for the applicant, so maybe if you can come up to the mic. We've been discussing the roll-up door, and I share Commissioner Hirschbein's concern.
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned that there will be some drywall probably going around the three sides of the roll-up door.
Yes.
But I know from experience that roll-up doors it's impossible to seal them correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question to you is, in terms of the function of receiving goods and materials and then the exporting of your product, what is the size of, is stuff coming in on pallets, or is it just in small boxes?
It'll be in probably also the plastic bins, maybe a 20-gallon bin that somebody might be carrying. but the amount of product that's going to be coming into the facility is very minimal. It might be a pound or two of cannabis. It's not anything, say, another distributor might be having at that time. It's very minimal.
Sure.
And I don't plan on using the roll-up door. My plan is to go out the front. The roll-up door, you see the other adjoining buildings, they all have the roll-up door to whatever, I don't know what that particular one, I think he's a graphic designer, but they all do have the roll-up doors in this particular facility.
I guess another question, would let's say a standard 3-foot wide door be adequate to get your stuff, your materials in and out?
Yes, it would.
Okay, thank you.
Are there more questions or discussion amongst discussion right now? Commissioner Song.
This is what I wish. I wish we had a sort of like an environmental consultant when it comes to baking products. We have had for dispensaries and for cannabis buildings, but this is the first baking product. So I wish we had an environmental consultant that has dealt with baking products and said, okay, for decarboning, it emits this amount of toxic, and therefore having this much CFM be through carbon filters meets the requirement of air exchange. Something that, other than us, gives a professional opinion that this space will serve. Or they will have a report that says having a roll-up door with quarter or half an inch gap all the way around, it really cancels out having a concealed space in which you mechanically condition and exhaust. And I can go on, but if we had somebody that says, listen, commissioners, you're just going too far. Listen, this baking omits this much odor and we're okay because, they have this kind of mechanical, then we can follow that through. But it seems that right now we're trying to support a small business, but are concerned that we may be saying yes to something that we don't know.
I just would like to, I hear all of the concerns, and I think all the concerns are very legitimate. I think when we get into cannabis, what we've experienced throughout the Coachella Valley, not just in Palm Springs, but throughout the Coachella Valley, is the odor, particularly from growing. And I think on some of the earlier cannabis facilities that came before us, the growing ones were the ones, I believe, that we were told gives off and the most odor, and particularly during the flowering season. I can tell you, having approved both dispensaries, growing facilities, as well as baking facilities in other communities, before it was legal, we would approve them, that the baking facility had, in my experience, had minimal, if any, odor on the outside of that particular facility. But I'm not an expert in odor control. It's just my experience with that. I would say in this particular instance, we could say, based upon further review by Building and Safety and potentially further review by our consultant, that if the door needs to be sealed, maybe we seal the door, that we could add that as a condition if we feel it's going to be a problem, or that the walls go up to the ceiling line, and then leave it up to the experts from there to determine if it's really necessary or not. Our odor control folks. Suggestion out there.
I think your concerns would be alleviated again if we have the odor consultant here, because it may well be that the odor consultant has dealt with baking facilities, knows what the risks are with respect to odor issues. And we don't see many of these, and I guess we're going to see fewer because of the moratorium maybe. And I would urge our director to talk to David Reddy about possibly having this person here for us when we are dealing with a cannabis application. I hate to throw all these issues against this one very small operation, which I think is probably going to be just okay. But it does call for the larger resolution to a problem. If we're dealing with a large facility, we're just not capable of coming up with the answers without some expertise.
Could I say interim because of the process that it will take for Mr. Reddy to address? In the interim, can we put these very specific questions to Director Flynn and then have those questions be sent up to the order consultant while Manager Reddy is trying to figure out how to increase the contract or the scope and so on?
If I can jump in, Mr. Chair, I think you made a very good suggestion that your concerns seem to be two. Number one is relative to the roll-up door. Number two is relative to the odor control between the spaces, and particularly looking at the construction up to the ceiling. What we might do is craft two conditions of approval that require both the odor control consultant to review the roll-up door and the construction at the ceiling of the business, that those two design or construction details need to be reviewed and approved by the odor consultant in order to verify that indeed the odor control plan will function and will not emit odors, and that we do those as conditions of approval.
Applicant's already indicated that she doesn't plan on using the roll-up door. So to put that aside, we could just ask her to run the drywall around the inside of it and just seal it off. And that makes that go away.
They may need to retain a second door for fire exiting purposes.
That's not a fire exit.
Yeah, roll-up doors don't close.
Okay.
Well, you may have a landlord who doesn't want that to take place, and then you've put her in a very difficult spot.
Well, yeah,
Because-
but the inside, it would always be operable. All they have to do is, 10 minutes would tear down the sheetrock.
But why are we doing,
Because we don't know.
But I think Flynn's suggestion is, we will know
No,
if it's
I don't
submitted to the
believe that
consultant.
I don't believe that the consultant is an expert on how to seal a roll-up door.
I can't believe that's not the case. He's an odor consultant, for God's sakes, and roll-up
At
doors is part of
HVAC.
it.
So if I could just call on Commissioner Gardner at this point.
I'm still very concerned with oversaturation in the neighborhood. And like you've pointed out, that's still right within the moratorium area. And it's actually closer to the neighborhood than the moratorium area, which is also interesting. I'm not opposed to cannabis generally, but I am opposed to there being too much in Palm Springs. Is it correct that this is the only facility of this kind? So it's just you? Yeah, the fact that it's a small business, that we don't have anyone doing baked goods leads me to think maybe it's okay, but at the same time, we have a huge list of places and a longer list of some throughout Palm Springs. So that's just my concern and what I'm kind of grappling with. And of course, the odor stuff as well, but you've all detailed that well.
Vice Chair Maruzzi.
I think as Commissioner Donenfeld said, we can't lay all of these concerns on this businesswoman. It's not appropriate. I mean, it's not fair to her. So now I think we've made very clear all of our concerns, and some of them will be addressed in the motion. But I think going forward, staff needs to know that we will be much tougher on approving these things unless we have all the information we need. If that requires a consultant to be here, that's what we would request. But in this case, I would make a motion that we approve the project as proposed, but with those two conditions that the director brought forward.
Could you repeat those for us?
Two conditions would be, as we discussed, that the details of either sealing off the roll-up door or using a smaller 3-foot door in that location, and the construction details to make sure that that's adequate. And then also the details of drywalling either up to the ceiling or making sure that there is adequate separation between the tenant space, that they are adequately sealed between this tenant space and the adjacent tenant space.
It was drywall to the underside of the roof deck,
Okay.
not to the ceiling.
So drywall to the underside of the roof deck. And that, again, our odor control consultant will review both of those construction details to make sure that the odor control plan functions in the way that it is supposed to with those.
Do we have
Well,
a s-
how can a roll-up
hold
door?
on.
Wait, we have a motion.
Hold on.
We have
Do
a
we have a
motion.
second to the motion?
I second the motion.
Can we discuss it?
Yeah, now it's open for discussion.
How can a roll-up door function when it's rolled up to control odors?
No, to either seal off the roll-up door, as you had suggested with drywall on the interior, or else, as Mr. Hudson had suggested earlier, that perhaps they don't need the entire door, and just a 3-foot opening, a standard door might suffice there in the rear, which would be better in terms of being able to seal it off.
Can I make a recommendation? Because I did something similar to my office in Santa Monica years ago. We had roll-up doors, and they're impossible to talk about air infiltration. I want to make this as inexpensive and as easy to accomplish as possible for the applicant. I got to think that the building owner wouldn't take too kindly to taking the door out. I think that roll-up doors should remain. I would recommend building a stud and chipboard wall on the inside of the roll-up door with a 3-foot man door, if you will, as part of that.
Next
So,
to?
no, not next to it.
Oh, got it. So they have to roll up the door and open the door?
Yes.
Okay.
That way they keep the security of the roll-up door, keep the integrity. You know, they're not punching another door into the,
Right.
whether it's tilt-up or whatever. That's one way of getting, I think, this appropriate seal to the space.
And I think that's the motion. I think that's a detail to the motion. I think it's a great detail to that motion.
And,
Ms. Song.
yes, and that's really great free architectural advice. And on top of that is the fact that you're going to be able to contain your conditioned air and not lose it in this gap. So it will save your energy bill as well. So there you go. You got recommendations and you got free advice.
And I accept the free advice as part of the motion.
And I too will accept their free advice.
If there's no more discussion, can we vote? Who made the second? I'm sorry. Okay, good. Sorry. Congratulations, it passes. Oops. Oh. Congratulations, and hopefully your business is successful, and hopefully it's odor-free.
Except for cooked baking brownies.
Thank you. And Director Flynn, it might be a good thing to have an odor, like, training session. Not into all the details of it, but just superficially, kind of have a training session on odor control.
Certainly, we'll look at doing both that and then also requesting if we can have the odor control consultant here in attendance at the meetings.
Okay, there's no unfinished business, there's no new business. We're going to move on to Planning Commission reports, requests, and comments.
I have something.
Okay.
Apparently, the council agenda for next week, Wednesday, will include a discussion of the golf course conversion ordinance that we all recommended. I would like the permission of the board, the commission, to actually represent, since I was on the subcommittee, represent the commission, since we all voted to approve the proposed ordinance, to speak before the council and say that I am representing the commission. And as we discussed and voted in public, after many public hearings, that we strongly support the ordinance. So that is what I would request. I don't know if it's appropriate, but that is what I request.
Can I just look at the attorney, since it's not on the agenda? How can we handle this? Because it's coming up before we meet again.
It's not on the agenda, so I would urge the commission not to give formal direction. If you want to just sort of take some, an informal blessing or something, I think that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Informal blessing, comments?
You got it in religious terms. I actually have a couple of announcements. One is Commissioner Hudson has been with us, has been with me my entire term here, but he's been with us much longer in the city than and I believe this is your last meeting. Is that, we have one more meeting. I will be out of town for the next couple of weeks, so if I'm going to ask my vice chair if he will try and put together something as a little going away for that.
It's not on the agenda, I can't do that.
You can informally bless the party.
For his service, and if it's beyond, I don't know, when do you leave to go to Northern California?
Well, it's part of that. I should point out that I did receive an email from city staff today requesting that I stay on through July, but I've signed up for some higher education courses in San Francisco, so next meeting will be my last.
Okay, well, thank you. So if we can plan something when I'm gone, that would be great. And I don't know if we can come up to a date now, but maybe we can go through staff. Can we go through staff to do that? Since, okay, is that okay? You can send out some dates or dates that are possible or something. Great, thank you. The other announcement that I have is I joined the ranks of Commissioner Gardner, Commissioner Gardner, and I've entered the city council race for District 2.
Oh,
So just to let you know. Thank you very much. That's my comments. So do we, a city council liaison is not here. Do we have a planning director's report?
But I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
I think somebody was asking before, is Commissioner Hudson the only seat that's up for filling?
No, my seat is up as well.
Your seat is up as well?
Yeah, and I've been asked to stay on through July.
Are you termed out, or you have to quit to run?
No, I took over a partial term, and that partial term is done.
So are you going to?
And I have reapplied, yes.
You have reapplied, okay.
Yes.
So those are the only two.
Okay. And when you don't know when council plans on filling?
They had a discussion, last month, about not needing to do interviews again. They may want to do that. I believe the last time that Commissioner Hudson, they weren't aware that you would not be requesting to extend. And so they may want to do interviews, but they had intended to do that before the end of June. I haven't seen a scheduled date yet, though.
Go ahead, Commissioner Song.
I just want to thank Flynn and the staff for giving us, allowing us to have tickets to the National Preservation Conference. I want to go on the record that I think as the city of Palm Springs and as the committees and that are not part of the city, we really hold up great respect for our architecture that is here, part of the history. There were times where I felt that the presenters from Palm Springs were, knocked it out of the park much more than the other lecturers that came from other places. I don't know if that was your opinion, but I was really fortunate to be part of that, but really proud of what Palm Springs stands for.
Yeah, I would echo that. Are there more comments from the commissioners at all? Okay, we'll move on to Planning Director's report.
I just have one item of business. With the end of the fiscal year and also the end of terms for the Architectural Advisory Committee, we have two members whose terms are expiring and are both eligible for reappointment. That would be Mr. Robert Rotman and Mr. Sean Lockyer. What I would recommend that we do is that we have a Planning Commission study session on the 26th. What I'm proposing is that we hold that at 1 p.m. So that way we don't have to bring you here before lunch. We could do that at 1 and hold the study session until 1:30 and then go into our regular meeting from there. But at that time, we can discuss the reappointment of those individuals or look at applications we may have. And if you'd like to continue interviews, we might be able to do that as well. But again, we can do that in a study session, discuss what we want to do with those appointments or reappointments.
Have they both reapplied?
Yes, they have. They're both interested in serving again.
Any more comments?
That's it.
All right. But just by the way, I'll add one to yours. I saw a model of our downtown park in the front lobby of the City Hall. So if anyone's not seen it, there's a complete model on your way out. go to the front lobby and you can see a model of City Park, the City Park, which is very nice. Okay, hearing nothing else, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second, motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners, for a great
So
meeting.
we'll be adjourning to 1 p.m. to a study session on June the 26th.
Thank you.
Thanks.